anymore. So this liberation gives you a newfound sense of joy for the life that you have, which I call love. When you have those two combined, then it completely changes and alters the way that you view the future you're stepping into. When we're in a limitation and fear, we have the experience of suffering because it's hopelessness and it's pointless. And we see this in life, right? Sadly, so many people have suicidal ideation, even attempts, and sometimes people are actually successful in committing suicide, which is, a heavy topic, but it happens because people are in the 1.0 mindset where they feel trapped. We're not doing that here. We're getting out of the constraints. Freedom, love, possibility is now how you view your future. When you have those three pillars at the basis of who you are for yourself, then you can't help but have vitality, right? Instead of dis-ease, you have ease, and then your biology knows how to take care of itself. The body's always trying to heal. See, Zoom confirms. This will happen every now and again, but it's really Zoom just confirming that I'm on track. So that's very good for my ego because then I feel good about what I'm sharing. Then you get this sense of vitality. And then from a sense of vitality, your relationship starts to exude harmony, right? So if you look at just those 5 qualities, we're going to go deeper into them, but they're the main distinctions between the world that most people live in, and I'm going to assert most of you are in, versus the world that we're heading to. The way I wrote it here is the introduction to a new way of being in all areas of life, health, wealth, relationships, and circumstances. What's possible beyond the current paradigm of mental worries, dysfunction, disease, problems, suffering, and fear. Well, I'm telling you, this is what's possible, which is you're here and you're going to get it. One of my favorite quotes that I started my whole career with, not because I started with it's not my quote, it's from Marcel Proust, who's a French writer. But it really was the first time I felt like someone knew what I was fucking talking about. I was like, oh, okay, there's some other people out there who get it. And he said that the real voyage of discovery consists not in finding new landscapes, but in looking through new eyes. So much of the work that we do here is all going to be about a shift in perspective. We're going to be looking at the way that you currently look at life. The way I phrase it is the you that you are for yourself. Many people in even the spiritual realms and these teachings and coaching will talk about limiting beliefs. You might even hear that term. You might have used it yourself. I am not in the business of limiting beliefs. That is too late. Limiting beliefs belong to the person that you are for yourself. There's a you there, right? You're like, I'm listening to this guy. But this you is based in subconscious limitations. Based on those limitations, you will generate beliefs automatically. So beliefs are important, but they're too far down the line of creation. We're going to be getting to the real nitty-gritty, as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. If you really get that, it's super powerful, right? This is victimhood. Until you make the unconscious, meaning your blind spots, conscious, meaning you become aware, those patterns at the deepest level of your brain will drive behavior, the way you think, feel, and act. And then you'll just say, oh, well, that's too bad. Like it was just happenstance. That's called fate. No, we're in the business of co-creating life and understanding that the way that you think, feel, and act, and consequently the results you get, are an inextricably directed connection to the subconscious constraints. So I'm in the business of revealing those. It will become much more evident as we start to work with people this afternoon. But that's the good news, is as I said at the beginning, the you that you are today is not going to survive this mastermind. And that is no way a slight, like that you're a bad person. A couple of you are a bit sketchy, let's face it. But for the most part, we're just going to be getting rid of the part of you that holds you back from your true nature and your true potential. Sound good? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, so let's start with the basics, right? So what is the mind? We talk about this mind. People talk about mindfulness and, they want to shift their mind and what's on your mind and all of this. But I would assert that most people don't even know what the mind is. We know what the brain is. You've got people out there who've dissected it, myself included. I studied human biology as my undergrad. I had to actually cut up cadavers. I can remember one of the classes, my professor, he literally, maybe not the best image to start the mastermind with, but he literally cut a skull in half, right? So, that's how people obviously understand the anatomy of what it is to be human. I'm not interested in the brain. It's very important. Obviously, we use it, most of you. But what we're talking about is mind. So the brain really represents what I would consider the hardware. The software is what I'm interested in, code, the way that you talk to yourself, the narrative, the things that you've imbibed and through osmosis you've taken on like they're truths because mum said and dad said, or your particular dogma said that you have to do this. That software is where all of the problems, constraints live. We all have whatever capacity we have to think. Our intelligence is somewhat defined by genetics. You can get more information. I'm not interested in that. It doesn't matter. I'm helping you to become the best version of you, right? So this isn't a game of comparison. This is helping you get out of your own way, because otherwise what most people are doing, and I really want you to hear what I'm about to say, in the world of self-improvement and the world of self-help, most people are simply becoming, listen, the best version of their limited self. You really get that? Most people are working on becoming the best version of their limited self. No judgment, no fault. They don't know that the person they're working on is limited. So think of it this way. I like to use analogies to help you to be able to digest some of the things that I share that can sometimes be quite heavy. Is if you lived in a 500 square foot studio and you didn't even have a bedroom, it was just a bathroom and a kitchenette was all in that one space, and you got it because it was pretty downtrodden and there was shitty carpet and mold in the drywall. Maybe the windows were cracked, and it was a good deal because it's really run down. What you could do with the right amount of money, you throw 40, 50 grand into it or whatever, and you do these tenant improvements, right? You rip up the carpet, you put down some beautiful wood floor. It can be real fancy from Paris if you want, I don't care. And you pull down the drywall, you take out the mold, you put up new paint that's lead free because you're all about conscious living and you want to be in a sustainable, clean environment. You put in a beautiful new kitchen, you put in gorgeous new furniture, you fix the windows so that's all clean, double glazed, all the things, right? What you've done is you've improved the limiting space, which is it's still 500 square feet. It didn't get any bigger, you just cleaned it. And that's how most people live in the world of self-development. We're not about that. I want you to understand what I'm going to be doing with each of you, not even if I'm working with you directly, but indirectly, is knocking down the walls of that 500 square foot studio apartment and revealing that that is one room in a 50,000 square foot mansion. Make sense? So that is the newfound possibility, is that we remove the constraint, we have freedom. Holy shit, I didn't even know that there was a whole nother world outside of this wall and that now I get to explore. That's the new possibility. So that is the world of dissolution versus solution. Okay. So really, I really want you to feel, as I said at the beginning, you can make as many notes as you want, but I want you to see, how does it apply to me? Wow, I can see that I've been trying to work on whatever it is in your life, and to what degree all I'm doing is improving my own limitations. There's something to be said for that. That's great. That's how most people are going to live their life. What I'm interested in is truly accessing the potential that you are, not refining the limitation you are. Okay. So what is the mind? The mind is a space. And that's the thing I want you to take from this. Like that 500 square foot analogy, the mind is a space. And whatever the space is that you have available to you is commensurate, is completely inextricably connected to what becomes available in your life. You live in a small space. That 500 square foot studio is not affording the tenant or the owner the conversation of throwing the Olympics in that space, right? That conversation doesn't even arise, let alone, holding a 200-person wedding reception for their best friend. Like, when someone's talking about they've got a tight budget and they're trying to do a wedding reception, the person in the 500 square foot studio isn't saying, come and have it at my place, right? So whilst, that is a very literal expression of space, I want you to understand that within the confines of your own mind, and particularly the language that is in your mind, you can only create to the capacity that you can see what's possible. And I really want you to understand this. When I really got this, it was so revelatory. I was like, holy shit, I'm pretty smart. I've got a good imagination. But I heard someone say, what I think is possible, so what you all think is possible, is not what's possible. And you can look at it both ways, right? Meaning, okay, based on your limitations, what you think is possible, you're not going to make possible because you're limited. Where the way I interpret it is like, holy shit, there's a whole other realm of complete possibilities that even my pretty advanced imagination can't access. That's the world of miracles that you're all going to be stepping into. Sound good? Good. So that's where we start with the mind. The mind is a space. The space is the container in which you currently house language and dialogue that is, I really want you to get this. There's certain things that I'm going to ask you to really pay attention to, perhaps write down and underline. The world that you currently live in is based in language that currently is insufficient to access the potential of your soul. Pretty heavy out of the gate. The language that you currently abide in, the 500 square foot studio that is the current dialogue, is insufficient to access the potentiality of the soul you are. If you just get that alone, it's like should be somewhat mind blowing, right? You, from my perspective, are timeless, boundless, limitless. You are pure potential itself. So, like this bottle of water, this water could, in theory, take on the shape of any container. Yes, I could pour it into a glass and then I'll have a glass of water. But if I have a bowl, now the water is like, oh, I've got a little bit more breathing room. Not that the water's thinking that. I have very smart water, so it has consciousness. But then I get it in a bathtub and it's like got a bathtub of water, right? So the water represents your soul. The bottle represents the language you're currently confined by. What we're doing in the dissolution process is we're breaking the container that is holding back the potentiality that your soul is here to express. I can't put it better than that. Again, I'll say this after every now and again. I'm glad this is recorded so I can listen to that. Okay. So the mind, the space that we're wanting to access is what's on the other side of the current constraints that are based in your language. Now, where did that language come from? My assertion is that we are all born with constraints. It's very easy to point fingers at parents, right? The blame game, the victim game. Oh, it's because dad was this and mum was that, and I never got any affection from mum, and dad was always angry, and whatever. These are all very appropriate things to say, for which we will have compassion, and I will work with many of you because of that. But it's not the cause of your constraint. It may have been the stimulus to turn on the constraint you arrived with, right? So let's just take a random example. You have an older sibling who was the better academic or the better athlete. So when they came home and they had the A and you had the B, dad was like always giving them attention or mum was giving them extra cuddles. And your experience of that was like, well, that's kind of bullshit, but now I feel like I'm somehow less than. So that may have been the quote unquote reason you felt less than, but the your less than was already in you. You curated the experience with your parents to turn that on so that in this karmic lifetime, you get to transcend beyond your feeling that you're less than because it's not true. You just got the evidence because of life circumstances. Does that make sense? So we're going to get out of the blame game. This is your own curated journey, which is cool because this is about empowerment. I often tell people, I can't give you something you don't already have. I'm just here to help remove what's in the way of you realizing that. And that's an empowering way to live because otherwise you go and see a therapist, the therapist will, I'll see you next week at the same time. No knock on therapists. Some of you might be therapists here. But I do remember one of my live events that I did, actually, we had to miss January because of the fires. But at my live event in December, a guy came up to me, very tall, was quite softly spoken, and he said, I've never heard of you until today. He said, a friend invited me to come, and he said, I have a thriving therapy practice. And he said, I haven't been inspired by by a human being like you as much as I have by this evening, which was, first of all, very touching. He said, you have a way of being able to transcend what we try to do in therapy, but I can now see that you're doing it in a way that means I don't have to do as much as I do because I'm not trying to, you're not trying to fix anyone, I am, right? And so it was very moving to hear from a professional who's done all of his work and paid whatever he had to go through med school and whatever it took for him to be him. So I'm not in the business of trying to fix you, right? As I said at the beginning, I'm in the business of getting rid of you. And I mean that in the most loving way. So space is what we're going to be creating more of by shattering the constraints that are based in your language through no fault of your own, but they are your own narratives, right? The I'm not enough, so I'm not loved. You'll hear them all. Again, I'm coming out of the gates hot, I know, and I did forewarn you that I tend to download pretty quickly. So if you're struggling, don't worry, you can watch this at any point. Occasionally I'll slow down, and especially when it's called for, if I'm working with somebody and they need a lot of help holding and compassion. But as it relates to giving you information, I'm really committed that you get the most comprehensive download of what it is to be human so that it really impacts your life. Okay, is that fair? Thank you very much. Okay, so the mind is a space. The space, depending on how much space you have, I want you to understand the correlation to what becomes available. Again, using the 500 square foot studio, not so much available. Doesn't mean it's a bad life, just not so much available. Living on 20 acres with a 50,000 square foot mansion or a castle, a lot more possible. You would be the person, the friend who's struggling to, pay for a reception. They're going to come to you and say, hey, do you mind if I have my reception at your sick castle in the south of France? Which I'm working towards getting. So, you know who to contact when you're getting married, okay? Only for masterminders, no one else. Okay, so that's the mind, it's the space. And then when we look at what it is to be human versus a human being, so I want you to be able to distinguish the difference. I really look at this as a noun versus a verb. So if you're a human being, there's sort of a static nature about that. Like there's this me here with the carbon meat suit that we all have, and I'm Peter, and I'm this, and I'm this age and this height, right? There's a certain degree of it's a stuck way of living. But when we look at being human, then that starts to introduce, well, who could I be, right? The realm of possibilities, the realm of like imagination, and especially when we're kids. I'm sure many of you will be parents or are parents. And so you can start to see, with a younger mind, there's a greater amount of space. And that's because they haven't had all the trials and tribulations and failures